Auction sold the black woman as infertile. But a rancher got her pregnant in 3 days and truly loved her. Echoes through the dusty square as the auctioneer's gavel strikes wood, sealing the trembling woman's fate to the highest bidder. The crowd sneers at damaged goods, a barren investment destined for kitchen labor and eventual disposal. The broken woman accepts her cursed existence, believing the lies whispered about her worthless womb. But when the quiet rancher steps forward with unexpected coin, something shifts in the morning air. His weathered hands don't reach for property. They extend toward salvation, neither anticipated. Yet beneath this transaction lurks a dangerous secret that could destroy them both. Her body harbors truths that powerful enemies have buried through poison and deception. Will 3 days of unexpected tenderness unravel a conspiracy built on stolen motherhood? Or will the truth condemn them both to something far worse than slavery? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The tansy tea burned Louisa's throat every morning for 3 years. Martha Briggs insisted it would keep her healthy for work. The bitter herbs made her stomach cramp and her body weak, but questioning Martha meant the whip. Louisa learned to read by candlelight using discarded newspapers. She memorized herb names and their effects while helping other women through difficult births. The tansy wasn't medicine. It was poison designed to steal her future. When her body tried 3 times to nurture life, Martha's special teas grew stronger. Each lost hope convinced everyone that Louisa carried a curse. The other women whispered that God had marked her barren as punishment. Martha smiled each time Louisa's body failed. She wrote careful notes in her ledger about maintaining valuable property. An infertile woman required less watching and brought premium prices from buyers seeking reliable labor without complications. The morning of the auction, Martha skipped the tea. Her business with Louisa was ending. Dustmere Creek's town square buzzed with the usual commerce of human flesh. Louisa stood on the weathered wooden platform, her hands bound, her eyes fixed on the dirt below. The auctioneer's voice boomed across the gathering crowd like thunder before a storm. This one's been tested for 3 years, proven infertile, perfect for housework without the mess of breeding complications. Laughter rippled through the assembled buyers. Men in worn hats calculated her worth in their heads. Women whispered about the blessing of owning someone who wouldn't produce inconvenient offspring. Martha Briggs positioned herself near the platform's edge. Her sharp eyes gleamed with satisfaction as she watched her investment about to pay dividends. 3 years of careful poisoning had created the perfect product. She's strong enough for heavy labor, but won't burden you with children, Martha called out helpfully. I guarantee her barren state personally. More chuckles from the crowd. Louisa's cheeks burned with shame, but she kept her gaze down. Fighting back meant punishment, and Martha's punishments left lasting scars. The bidding started low. Kitchen work and cleaning didn't command high prices, especially for someone carrying such obvious defects. Most buyers saw her as a temporary investment, useful until age made her worthless. Then a different voice cut through the mockery. $50. The crowd turned toward the speaker. Jedediah Cole stood apart from the other buyers, his broad frame casting shadows in the morning sun. His face remained unreadable, but his eyes held something the others lacked. Kindness, perhaps, or recognition of shared pain. Martha's smile faltered. She knew Jedediah's reputation as a fair but solitary man who'd lost his wife and unborn child 2 winters past. His ranch prospered, but grief had made him a hermit. 50 going once, the auctioneer called. No other bids came. Damaged goods weren't worth fighting over, especially against a man with Jedediah's resources and respected standing in the community. The gavel fell with finality. Jedediah approached the platform as papers changed hands. His movements were deliberate and gentle as he unlocked Louisa's shackles. She expected rough handling, but his touch was careful. Can you ride? He asked quietly. She nodded, not trusting her voice. The journey to his ranch took 2 hours through rolling hills dotted with cattle. Jedediah rode beside her, not ahead like an owner claiming property. He offered water twice and slowed the pace when her horse struggled with loose stones. His ranch sprawled across a green valley protected by gentle slopes. The main house stood solid and welcoming, painted white with a wraparound porch. Outbuildings dotted the property in neat rows. Everything spoke of prosperity earned through honest work. Jedediah dismounted and helped her down. His hands were calloused from years of labor, but his grip remained respectful. "You'll have your own room in the smaller house there." He pointed to a tidy cabin 50 yards from the main building. "It has a good lock on the inside." Louisa blinked in surprise. Privacy was a luxury she'd forgotten existed. "I expect honest work for honest pay," he continued, "but I don't expect anything beyond that. We're both carrying grief, and grief deserves respect." Her room contained a real bed with clean sheets and a window that opened to mountain views. A small table held a basin and pitcher for washing. Books lined a shelf near the window, real books with stories and knowledge. That night, Louisa slept without fear for the first time in years. 3 days passed in unexpected peace. Jedediah assigned her cooking and mending, but he asked rather than demanded. He said please and thank you as if her efforts mattered. When she prepared meals, he ate what she cooked without complaint or criticism. On the 4th morning, her body felt different. The familiar cramping was gone, replaced by something else. Something she remembered from before Martha's teas grew stronger. Her hands trembled as realization dawned. Without the daily poison, her body was remembering how to hope again. But hope carried danger. If the townspeople discovered her pregnancy, they'd call it impossible. Martha would claim witchcraft or worse. Jedediah might believe he'd been deceived. Louisa pressed her palm against her still flat stomach. After years of manufactured barrenness, life was quietly taking root. The question that would determine everything hung in the air like morning mist. Should she tell Jedediah the truth about what was growing inside her, or let him discover that everything the auction promised about her was a carefully constructed lie? Louisa stared at her reflection in the basin water for 10 minutes before finding courage. The truth sat heavy in her chest like a stone. Jedediah deserved honesty, even if it destroyed the fragile peace she'd found. She found him mending fence posts near the cattle pen. His movements were methodical and sure, each repair built to last decades. Sweat darkened his shirt despite the cool morning air. "I need to tell you something," she said. Jedediah set down his hammer. His weathered face showed patience learned through years of loss. "I'm with child." The words hung between them like smoke. Jedediah's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Not anger or accusation, something deeper. "The baby isn't yours," Louisa continued quickly. "I was already carrying when you bought me. The previous owner's son forced himself on me the night before the auction." Jedediah removed his work gloves slowly. His silence stretched long enough for doubt to creep into Louisa's heart. She prepared for rejection, for the fury of a man who believed he'd been cheated. Instead, he stepped closer. A child is a blessing, regardless of how it came to be. His voice carried the weight of a man who'd lost everything once before. "If you'll have me, I'll raise this child as my own." Tears threatened to spill from Louisa's eyes. No one had ever spoken to her with such gentle certainty. No one had ever offered her something precious without demanding payment in return. "Why?" she whispered. "Because children deserve fathers who choose them, and because you deserve better than what this world has given you." That afternoon, complications with the cattle gave Louisa her first chance to prove her worth beyond cooking and cleaning. The best milk cow, heavy with her own calf, had been laboring since dawn without progress. Jedediah stood helpless as his investment and her offspring faced death. "Let me try," Louisa said. Jedediah hesitated. Cattle birthing was dangerous work that could cripple or kill the inexperienced. "I've helped with difficult births before." She rolled up her sleeves and approached the struggling animal. Her hands moved with practiced confidence, feeling for the calf's position. Years of assisting other enslaved women through traumatic deliveries had taught her to work by touch and instinct. The calf was breeched, its hind legs blocking the birth canal. Louisa worked carefully to reposition the tiny body, while the mother groaned in distress. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she fought to save 2 lives. "There," she breathed as the calf's front hooves appeared. Minutes later, a healthy bull calf dropped into the straw. The mother immediately began cleaning her baby with long strokes of her tongue. Both animals would survive because of Louisa's knowledge. Jedediah stared at her with new respect. "Where did you learn that?" "Helping other women when their babies came wrong. Martha never bothered with difficult births, said they were God's way of culling the weak." Martha was wrong about many things. That evening, Jedediah asked her to join him for dinner in the main house instead of eating alone in her cabin. They sat at his kitchen table sharing beef stew and fresh bread. The conversation came easier now, built on mutual respect earned through the day's crisis. "Tell me about your wife," Louisa said. Jedediah's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Pain flickered across his features before settling into something gentler. "Sarah loved this place. She planned to fill it with children and laughter." He set down his fork. "She died trying to give me a son, both of them buried under the oak tree behind the house. I'm sorry. I thought God was punishing me for something. Now I think maybe he was preparing me for this moment." 3 miles away in town, Martha Briggs paced her small parlor like a caged animal. Word had reached her about Jedediah's kindness toward his new property. Kindness bred complications, and complications threatened her carefully constructed business model. She'd spent 5 years perfecting her system. Young women purchased cheap, poisoned with herbs to prevent pregnancy, then sold at premium prices as guaranteed infertile laborers. The tansy and pennyroyal mixture worked perfectly when administered daily. Without it, her investments became liabilities. Martha visited Preacher Elias Thompson that evening. The thin man listened to her concerns with the calculating attention of someone who understood profit margins disguised as moral outrage. "Something unnatural is happening at that ranch," Martha suggested carefully. "A barren woman doesn't suddenly become fertile without dark influences." Preacher Thompson's eyes gleamed. His congregation donated more when they had something to fear and someone to blame. A convenient target for their suspicions would fill both needs perfectly. "I'll include warnings about false miracles in Sunday's sermon," he promised. Dr. Samuel Winters noticed the pattern 3 days later while reviewing his medical records. 7 women sold as infertile. In the past 2 years had all passed through Martha Briggs's care. The odds of such concentration seemed mathematically impossible unless deliberate intervention was involved. He'd attended medical college back east before settling in Dustmere Creek. His training taught him to recognize systematic poisoning symptoms, especially reproductive interference using common herbs. The pieces of Martha's puzzle were beginning to form a disturbing picture. At the ranch, Jedediah and Louisa worked side by side repairing storm damage to the barn roof. Their partnership had evolved beyond employer and employee into something approaching genuine friendship. She anticipated his needs before he voiced them. He trusted her judgment on matters he'd previously handled alone. The townspeople who rode past on business increasingly stared with open curiosity. A man treating his property as an equal partner violated unspoken social rules. Such behavior suggested dangerous ideas about human worth and dignity. Change was coming to Dustmere Creek, whether its residents welcomed it or not. The question was whether love could survive the storm that prejudice and greed were already brewing. 2 weeks after the barn repairs, Jedediah found Louisa reading by lamplight in her cabin. The book was one of his favorites, a collection of poetry that Sarah had cherished. Seeing Louisa absorbed in the same verses that once brought his wife joy stirred something unexpected in his chest. "You read beautifully," he said from the doorway. Louisa looked up, her finger marking her place on the page. "I taught myself with newspaper scraps. Real books are still a wonder." Sarah would have liked sharing her library with someone who appreciated words. The mention of his deceased wife didn't carry the usual weight of sorrow. Instead, it felt like a bridge between past happiness and future possibility. Jedediah stepped into the cabin's warm circle of light. "Louisa, I've been thinking about our situation." She set the book aside, giving him her full attention. This child deserves parents who chose each other, not just circumstances that threw us together. He removed his hat, turning it nervously in his hands. Would you consider marrying me? The proposal wasn't born of passion or desperation. It grew from weeks of shared work, quiet conversations, and mutual respect that had deepened into something stronger. You don't have to answer tonight, he added quickly. Take whatever time you need. Yes. The simple word carried 3 years of longing for safety, dignity, and the radical possibility of being genuinely wanted by another human being. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. Jedediah's smile transformed his entire face. For the first time since Sarah's death, hope looked like something more than mere survival. Their courtship bloomed over the following days with the quiet intensity of late autumn flowers. Jedediah brought her wildflowers from the meadow and helped expand the vegetable garden she'd requested. Louisa mended his clothes with care that went beyond duty, and cooked meals that reminded him food could be more than fuel. They talked through evening chores about books, dreams for the ranch, and the future they were building together. Love grew between them like something planted in good soil after years of drought. In town, Martha Briggs' campaign against the unlikely couple gained momentum with each passing Sunday. Preacher Thompson's sermons about false miracles and unnatural fertility drew larger crowds hungry for righteous indignation. When the barren suddenly bear fruit, we must ask what dark bargains were struck, he thundered from the pulpit. What promises were made to powers that oppose God's will? The congregation nodded knowingly. They'd all heard about the impossible pregnancy and the rancher who treated his property like an equal. Such behavior threatened the natural order they depended on for their own security. Martha spread her poison through afternoon tea gatherings and chance meetings at the general store. She spoke with the authority of someone who'd managed difficult slaves for years. I warned Jedediah that woman carried curses in her blood, she confided to anyone willing to listen. Now, look what's happened. She's bewitched him completely. Dr. Winters continued his investigation into Martha's business practices. His medical records revealed a disturbing pattern. Every woman Martha had sold as infertile showed symptoms consistent with systematic herbal poisoning. The tansy and pennyroyal combination was a well-known abortifacient when administered regularly. He began discreet inquiries with other doctors in neighboring towns. Their responses confirmed his worst suspicions. Martha's network extended far beyond Dustmere Creek, creating a profitable trade in deliberately damaged human beings. The evidence demanded action, but accusations against respected community members required careful preparation. One mistake would destroy his credibility and allow Martha to continue her crimes unpunished. Jedediah and Louisa married on a crisp October morning in the ranch house parlor. Dr. Winters performed the ceremony as one of the few townspeople willing to stand with them publicly. The simple service lasted 10 minutes and bound them legally and spiritually. As they exchanged vows, riders approached on the main road. Martha Briggs led a group of 15 townspeople, their faces set with righteous purpose. They reached the front yard as Jedediah kissed his new wife. This wedding is an abomination, Martha declared from horseback. That woman has bewitched Jedediah Cole with unnatural powers. Preacher Thompson urged his horse forward. The church demands she submit to examination for evidence of witchcraft and devil worship. Jedediah stepped protectively in front of Louisa. Get off my land. We're here on God's business, the preacher replied. That woman's pregnancy violates natural law. I personally witnessed her barren state for 3 years. Then maybe your witnessing was faulty, the crowd murmured angrily. Challenging their spiritual leader bordered on blasphemy in their minds. Martha played her strongest card. She's poisoned 3 people in town with contaminated well water. This is revenge for being sold like the property she was born to be. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Poison meant murder, and murder meant hanging. Even Jedediah's protection couldn't save Louisa from a mob convinced of her guilt. Dr. Winters stepped forward, his medical bag clutched tight in his hands. The moment of truth had arrived sooner than he'd hoped, but silence was no longer possible. "I have evidence that changes everything about this situation." Martha's confident smile faltered slightly. "What evidence?" "Evidence that reveals the real poisoner among us." The crowd leaned forward, sensing drama that would feed gossip for months. They expected confirmation of their suspicions about the witch who'd bewitched their respected rancher. Instead, they were about to learn that the wolf had been hiding among the sheep all along. Dr. Winters opened his medical bag with deliberate slowness. The crowd pressed closer, expecting confirmation of their worst fears about Louisa. Martha Briggs maintained her confident posture, but her knuckles whitened around her horse's reins. "For the past month, I've been investigating unusual patterns in my medical records," Dr. Winters began. 7 women sold as infertile in 2 years. All passed through Martha Briggs's care. All showed identical symptoms. Martha's smile tightened. "I don't know what you're suggesting, Doctor." "I'm suggesting systematic poisoning." He pulled out a leather journal filled with careful notes. "Tansy and pennyroyal administered daily to prevent pregnancy, a calculated business practice disguised as medical care." The crowd stirred uneasily. These were serious accusations against a respected member of their community. "That's ridiculous," Martha snapped. "I've devoted my life to managing difficult property. This woman has obviously filled your head with lies to cover her witchcraft." Dr. Winters held up a small vial containing dried herbs. "I found this in your storage shed 2 nights ago. Enough tansy to render a dozen women infertile, along with your business ledger detailing prices for guaranteed barren slaves." Martha's face drained of color. The evidence was damning, but she'd built her reputation on years of careful manipulation. The town trusted her word over a newcomer doctor's theories. "You broke into my property and stole private belongings," she countered. "That proves nothing except your willingness to commit crimes to protect your friend's unnatural pregnancy." Preacher Thompson nodded vigorously. "Dr. Winters has been corrupted by the same dark influences affecting Jedediah. We can't trust anything he says." The crowd murmured agreement. Their worldview depended on Martha being righteous and Louisa being evil. Dr. Winters' evidence threatened everything they believed about divine justice and natural order. But 3 women in the crowd had experienced Martha's special care firsthand. They exchanged meaningful glances as pieces of their own suffering began forming a terrible picture. Sarah Mitchell stepped forward. Her hands trembled as she addressed the group. "I drank Martha's tea for 2 years. She said it would keep me healthy. I never quickened once during that time." "Because you're naturally barren," Martha replied quickly. "Some women aren't meant to bear children." "Then why did I conceive 3 months after leaving your care?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Sarah's pregnancy was visible proof that Martha's treatments had unnatural effects. 2 other women nodded slowly. Their own experiences with Martha's mandatory herbal remedies suddenly took on sinister meaning. The bitter tea that made them sick, the cramping that followed each dose, the relief when it finally stopped. Dr. Winters pressed his advantage. "I've contacted doctors in 3 neighboring counties. Martha's network extends far beyond our town. She's been selling this technique to other slaveholders for 5 years." Martha realized her careful empire was crumbling. Panic replaced confidence in her voice. "You're all being deceived by that woman's evil influence. She's turned this entire town against God-fearing Christians." "Louisa had nothing to do with my investigation," Dr. Winters replied calmly. "I began researching before I knew she existed. The evidence speaks for itself." Preacher Thompson saw his own complicity about to be exposed. He'd taken money from Martha to provide religious justification for her practices. His sermons about barren women being cursed had supported her business model for years. "The doctor is obviously lying," he declared desperately. Satan himself could produce false evidence to protect his servants. But the crowd was beginning to waver. 3 women had confirmed Dr. Winters' theory with their own experiences. The mathematical impossibility of so many infertile women passing through one person's care suggested deliberate intervention. Martha played her final card. "Even if my methods were unconventional, I was protecting you all from dangerous breeding among inferior stock. Would you rather have your streets filled with unwanted children?" The naked cruelty of her words shocked even her supporters. She'd revealed the poisonous philosophy that motivated her crimes. Louisa spoke for the first time since the confrontation began. Her voice carried the quiet authority of someone who'd survived years of systematic abuse. I kept records, too. She produced a small notebook from her dress pocket. The pages contained careful observations written by candlelight over months of secret investigation. I documented every woman who passed through Martha's care, every forced dose of her special tea, every pregnancy that mysteriously failed. Louisa's voice grew stronger with each revelation. I also kept samples of the herbs she used. Martha lunged forward as if to grab the notebook, but Jedediah blocked her path. His expression promised violence if she touched his wife. "You have no right," Martha snarled. "You're nothing but property. Your word means nothing against decent white folks." "My word is supported by physical evidence and witness testimony," Louisa replied calmly. "Truth doesn't depend on the color of the person speaking it." Dr. Winters took the notebook and quickly scanned its contents. Louisa's observations were detailed, accurate, and thoroughly damning. She'd built a case against Martha that would stand up in any court. The crowd began backing away from Martha as the full scope of her crimes became clear. She hadn't just poisoned enslaved women, she'd created a profitable industry around systematic reproductive violence. But Martha wasn't finished fighting. Cornered animals were always most dangerous, and she still had one weapon left to deploy. "If I'm going down," she hissed, "I'm taking everyone with me." Martha's threat sent ice through Dr. Winters' veins. She knew exactly which townspeople had purchased her services and which respected families had benefited from her poisoning techniques. Her client list read like a directory of Dustmere Creek's most prominent citizens. "You think you can destroy me alone?" Martha's voice carried the venom of a cornered snake. "Half this town paid for my methods. Judge Harrison bought 3 guaranteed infertile women last spring. Mayor Collins personally requested my special tea recipe for his plantation." The crowd shuffled nervously. Martha's accusations implicated people they'd never dare challenge publicly. Preacher Thompson saw his chance to regain control. "She's lying to save herself. Don't let this criminal drag innocent names through the mud." But Martha had spent years collecting insurance against exactly this moment. She pulled a leather journal from her saddlebag, its pages filled with names, dates, and payment records. Every transaction is documented. Every client who paid premium prices for women guaranteed never to breed. Every respectable family who wanted reliable labor without complications. Dr. Winters realized the full scope of the conspiracy. Martha hadn't operated alone. She'd built a network that reached into every level of local society. Louisa suddenly doubled over, clutching her swollen belly. Pain shot across her face as the stress of confrontation triggered early labor contractions. "The baby's coming," she gasped. Jedediah caught her as her legs gave way. The timing couldn't have been worse. His wife needed immediate medical attention, but leaving meant abandoning the fight for justice. Martha laughed with cruel satisfaction. "Look at that. The witch's spawn chooses this moment to enter the world. Probably another demon sent to corrupt our town." The crowd pressed closer, their fear overriding any sympathy for a woman in labor. Preacher Thompson raised his hands as if warding off evil spirits. "We can't let that cursed child be born on sacred ground," he declared. "God is showing us the truth through divine timing." Dr. Winters stepped between the mob and his patients. "I'm taking Louisa inside where I can properly assist with the birth. Anyone who interferes will answer to the territorial authorities." "You have no authority here," Martha snarled. "That woman poisoned our wells. She's tried to murder innocent Christians. We won't let her spawn more evil." Several men in the crowd murmured agreement. The situation was spiraling beyond reason into dangerous mob mentality. Jedediah lifted Louisa in his arms, carrying her toward the house. "Get off my property or face the consequences." "What consequences?" Martha's confidence returned as she counted supporters in the crowd. "You're outnumbered 15-1. That devil woman will face justice today." But as Jedediah reached the porch steps, Unexpected allies emerged from the barn. 3 ranch hands he'd sent to town for supplies had returned during the confrontation. They positioned themselves with rifles ready, not aimed at anyone, but clearly prepared for trouble. Tom Bradley, his foreman for 5 years, spoke with quiet authority. "Boss treats us fair and pays honest wages. Anyone wanting trouble with him gets trouble with all of us." The armed support gave the crowd pause. What had started as righteous justice was becoming a potential gun battle with uncertain odds. Dr. Winters seized the moment to address the wavering mob. "Look at yourselves. You're threatening a woman in labor and the man trying to protect her. Is this the Christian behavior you claim to represent?" Some faces in the crowd showed shame, but Martha's fury drove her past rational thought. She spurred her horse toward the porch, clearly intending to trample anyone in her path. Jedediah's foreman raised his rifle. "Ma'am, I'd step back if I were you." Martha reined in her horse just short of the porch steps, her face twisted with rage at being thwarted by hired help. Inside the house, Louisa's contractions intensified rapidly. The stress and confrontation had triggered hard labor that wouldn't wait for convenient timing. "I need hot water and clean towels," Dr. Winters called out as he helped Louisa to the bedroom. Jedediah reluctantly left his wife's side to fetch supplies. Through the window, he could see the crowd growing larger as word spread through town. Martha was using the delay to rally more supporters and spread fresh lies about witchcraft and poison. Louisa gripped the doctor's hand as another contraction hit. "Something's wrong. The baby's coming too fast." "First babies usually take longer," Dr. Winters soothed. "But stress can speed everything up. Try to stay calm." Outside, Martha had found her second wind. She stood in her stirrups, addressing the crowd like a general rallying troops. "That woman has bewitched our doctor along with everyone else. We can't trust anything he says about natural birth or medical evidence. The only cure for witchcraft is fire." Preacher Thompson nodded eagerly. "Purification through flame. It's the only way to cleanse our town of this evil influence." Several men rode back toward town to gather torches and rope. The mob was transforming from accusers seeking justice into vigilantes planning murder. Tom Bradley counted the approaching riders and calculated odds that were rapidly shifting against them. 3 ranch hands with rifles could hold off 15 angry townspeople for a while, but not an army carrying torches. "Boss," he called through the window, "we've got maybe an hour before they come back with serious numbers." Inside, Louisa's labor progressed with frightening intensity. The baby was coming whether the world outside was ready or not. The final confrontation between truth and prejudice was about to begin with the highest possible stakes. A new life would enter the world surrounded by people who wanted to destroy it before drawing its first breath. The sound of approaching horses thundered across the valley as Martha's reinforcements returned from town. Torches flickered in the growing dusk like angry stars. The mob had swollen to over 30 people, their faces hard with righteous fury. Inside the bedroom, Louisa pushed through another contraction, as Dr. Winters prepared for the final stage of labor. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cool evening air. "I can see the head," Dr. Winters announced. "One more strong push should do it." Jedediah held his wife's hand while watching armed riders surround his property. Everything he'd built over 10 years was about to burn because he'd chosen love over convention. "Whatever happens out there doesn't matter," he whispered to Louisa. "This baby is coming into a world where it's already loved." Martha's voice carried clearly through the windows as she addressed her assembled army. "That house contains evil that threatens every God-fearing family in this county. We end it tonight." Tom Bradley and the other ranch hands had taken defensive positions behind water troughs and fence posts. Their rifles were loaded, but they faced impossible odds if the situation turned violent. "One last chance," Tom called out to the mob. "Ride away peaceful and nobody gets hurt." Preacher Thompson held a burning torch high above his head. "We're here on the Lord's business. Stand aside and let righteousness prevail." At that moment, Louisa's final push brought new life into the chaos. Dr. Winters caught the baby as it emerged, clearing its airway with practiced efficiency. The infant's first cry pierced the night air like a declaration of defiance. "It's a girl," Dr. Winters announced. Healthy and strong, Louisa collapsed against the pillows, exhausted but triumphant. Her body had done what Martha's poisons were designed to prevent. Life had found a way despite every obstacle placed in its path. Jedediah stared at the tiny face scrunched in indignation at being born into such a hostile world. "She's perfect." "What will you name her?" Dr. Winters asked as he cleaned the baby. "Grace," Louisa whispered, "because Grace brought us all together." Outside, Martha heard the infant's cries and flew into a rage. The successful birth proved everything she'd claimed about infertility was a lie. Her entire business model was crumbling with each healthy breath the baby took. "Burn them out," she screamed. "That demon spawn cannot be allowed to live." Several men dismounted with torches, advancing toward the house. The moment of violence everyone had dreaded was finally arriving. Then unexpected voices rose from within the crowd itself. "Wait!" Sarah Mitchell pushed through the assembled riders. "I've been thinking about what Dr. Winters said, about the tea Martha made me drink." Two other women joined her, their faces set with grim determination. They'd found courage in numbers and truth. "Martha poisoned us," declared Rebecca Hayes. "All of us who couldn't conceive while under her care. She stole our chances at motherhood and sold us like broken goods." The crowd wavered as their victims spoke with voices that couldn't be ignored or dismissed. These were their neighbors, their fellow church members, speaking truths that demanded acknowledgement. Martha realized her support was fracturing. Don't listen to them. They've been corrupted by the witch's influence. Can't you see how she's turned them against their own kind? But doubt had taken root. Too many pieces of evidence pointed toward Martha's guilt. The mathematical impossibility of so many infertile women, Dr. Winters' medical knowledge, the testimony of multiple witnesses. Judge Harrison rode forward from the back of the crowd. His weathered face showed the conflict between self-preservation and justice. "Martha, if these accusations are true, you've committed serious crimes against multiple people. The territorial authorities will need to investigate." "You bought 3 women from me last spring," Martha snarled. "Don't pretend your hands are clean." The judge's face went pale. His complicity was now public knowledge, but his position demanded he uphold the law even when it implicated himself. "Then we'll all face the consequences of our actions," he said quietly. "But this mob justice ends now." Preacher Thompson saw his influence slipping away. "The judge has been corrupted too. We can't trust anyone in authority. The people must act." But the people were beginning to understand they'd been manipulated by someone who profited from their hatred and fear. Martha had used their prejudices to build a criminal empire that victimized everyone. Dr. Winters emerged from the house, carrying baby Grace wrapped in a clean blanket. The infant's face was peaceful now, unaware of the violence that had surrounded her birth. "This is what you wanted to destroy," he said to the crowd. "An innocent child whose only crime was being born to parents who love her." The sight of the baby drained the fight from most of the mob. Whatever they thought about Louisa and Jedediah, the child was blameless. Burning a house with a newborn inside crossed lines that decent people couldn't justify. Martha made one final desperate attempt to salvage her position. "That baby will grow up to corrupt other children. We have to stop the evil before it spreads." "The only evil here is what you've done to innocent women," Sarah Mitchell replied. "You're the one who needs stopping." Judge Harrison dismounted and walked toward Martha with grim purpose. "Martha Briggs, you're under arrest for systematic poisoning, fraud, and conspiracy. You'll be held for trial when the territorial circuit judge arrives." Martha's empire collapsed in a single moment. Years of careful manipulation crumbled as the truth finally emerged into daylight. 6 months later, Louisa sat on her porch, watching Grace sleep in a handmade cradle, while Jedediah worked with cattle in the distance. The ranch had become a sanctuary for women escaping situations similar to her own past. Dr. Winters visited weekly, bringing medical supplies and news from town. Martha had been sentenced to 20 years in territorial prison. Preacher Thompson had fled in disgrace. Judge Harrison had resigned his position but cooperated fully with investigations that shut down similar operations across 3 territories. Louisa had established a small school in the ranch's guest house, teaching reading and basic medicine to women who'd never had such opportunities. Knowledge was the best weapon against future exploitation. Grace gurgled contentedly in her cradle, surrounded by love and protected by truth that had finally conquered lies. Her birth had transformed not just her parents' lives, but an entire community's understanding of justice and human worth. The family on the mountain had become a symbol of hope, that love could flourish even in the harshest conditions, and that dignity once claimed could never again be taken away.